Welcome back. New reaction to the 180-degree change in course in Afghanistan. President Obama declaring the U.S. drawdown of troops in Afghanistan will not happen the way he originally promised. There are 9,800 troops currently stationed there. The original plan was to cut that to about 1,000-person embassy force after 2016. Now that number will increase to 5,500 men and women in uniform helping fight terrorism and train Afghani forces. Ambassador James Jeffrey is the former U.S. ambassador to Iraq, Turkey, and Albania, and a distinguished fellow at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. Sir, good to have you on the program. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Your reaction to the president's plans this week?
One, this was an important and positive decision. I think it's a mistake to cut down to the 5,500. I wish he would have held at 9,800, but frankly, we'll be at that number throughout most of 2016, and it's up to the next president to take a decision to go back up if he actually does cut to 5,500. So a good decision for Afghanistan, but more importantly, it's a good decision for our foreign policy. President Obama has been arguing that his signature foreign policy goal is ending America's wars. He thinks that would provide security for not only us but the rest of the world. That tragically hasn't happened, and this may well be a reversal of course. We have to wait and see.
Well, I mean, what does this tell us, though, about the overall foreign policy that the American people should understand? Because the president has been talking for many years now about pulling troops back, leading from behind, getting out of these wars. Did he just miss it? Did he just not understand what truly was happening? So he has to reverse back to more troops?
It's a good question. First of all, when he came into office, there was a great deal of public dissatisfaction with hundreds of thousands of American troops sloshing around in Afghanistan and Iraq doing essentially armed nation building. That wasn't popular, and it really wasn't working all that well. He had a point in trying to wind down from that. But he has gone much further on the not executing the red line with Libya, not reacting even by sending defensive weapons to Ukraine, the rather weak reaction to the Russian intervention in Syria just recently, the slow reaction to ISIS in Iraq. He basically has avoided almost any use of military force, however small scale and however low risk, other than going after terrorists, which frankly is an easy, no-risk option. And the result is our enemies and opponents are gaining points all over the world, from South China Sea to the Ukraine and the Baltics.
I think this is a really important point that you're making, and it leads me to my next question, which is really what are the implications of more troops on the ground right now in this part of the world? I mean, does this lead to even further conflict?
I do not think so. I think it will dampen down conflict, because what we've seen since 1945 is the wise, I underline wise, having been involved in both Iraq and Vietnam, the wise use of American power has reduced, not increased, insecurity and danger around the world. That's a possibility. I'm not sure he gets it yet. We'll have to see. It's a fight for, frankly, his views on this matter. What will happen in Afghanistan is these forces will provide the intelligence, counterterrorism, special forces, air support, and command and control that the Afghanis need. They'll do 99% of the fighting and, frankly, dying on the battlefield, but our troops will make them far more effective, and that's exactly what the Afghans need and what we need, not only there.
And do you think our troops have a clear understanding of what the strategy is? I mean, too often we speak with the military, and they say they don't necessarily have a coherent strategy to follow. Do you think it's very clear-cut at this point what the president is trying to do for our troops?
It's clearer this week than it was 2 weeks ago.
Right.
Imagine being a soldier, and those soldiers, those special forces that were fighting in Kunduz, and I use the verb fighting deliberately, despite what the president says, to retake that city, and they did with the Afghans retake the city. They weren't sure what they were doing because they were all going to be pulled out within a year and a half. Now that he's saying it's the mission that drives our forces, and the mission is to at least avoid defeat. In other words, although he wouldn't use that word, the V word, victory, the troops will be far better motivated. I was one of the last troops in Vietnam. I know what it's like to be on a withdrawal.
Ambassador, real quick, yes or no answer. Do you believe North Korea when they say reportedly they want to sign a peace treaty with the U.S. to end 60-plus years of conflict?
Absolutely not. This is a trick to get around their possession of nuclear weapons. That's a precondition. And their battle is not just with us. It's with South Korea and the entire UN, technically. They're trying to do this directly with us.
Ambassador, good to have you on the program today. Thanks very much. We appreciate your time this morning. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.
New credit cards with a security chip supposed to help stop fraud, but retailers are running behind on technology needed to process them. We'll talk with the CEO of payment processor First Data coming up back in a moment as we look ahead on Sunday Morning Futures.